Good morning, true crime lovelies. I hope you are well. Happy Friday. I hope you are as lovely in life as you are in my mind. All right, we're going to get into Donna Adelson's hearing. I know it started at 9. I moved our start time back to 10:15 just because life. And I did not want to rush Sugar Bear just so I could come and do a live. So I already have it queued up. I'm going to run do we need the intro? I'll thank the members later. Members, if you're here, I appreciate you. Actually, we have time because we were going to come in. We're like 8 minutes early. I'll go ahead and run the intro. This is your sound warning. The intro is coming. Alrighty, let's get into it. I don't think the judge is going to make a decision today. I think it'll be reduced to writing, but this is Donna's request for change of venue. Seems like some of you guys recognize the witness that he was in the Kohlberger case that helped get a new venue. Although I think that venue was more of a infrastructure in the town issue than a media saturation issue. But let me know what you guys think. Last time they moved somebody out of this area was Ted Bundy. I don't know that Donna's as famous as Ted Bundy. I've got a matcha latte and a glazed blueberry donut. I'm supposed to stop having so many donuts, but not today. I'm going to do it at 1.25.
All right, we're here this morning on State versus Adelson, 2023 CF 3226, the defense's motion to change the venue of the trial. Parties may make their appearances.
Georgia Kappelman for the state. Sir Catherine Dugan for the state. Jackie Fulford on behalf of Mrs. Adelson.
Joshua Zellman on behalf of Mrs. Adelson.
And I will note the defendant is present in the courtroom for the evidentiary hearing as well. Before we get started with taking of the testimony of the witness, Mr. Murphy, I believe he's going to be the only witness for the defense today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right. In reviewing the motion, the affidavits in support, and also the memorandum of law, I wanted to make sure the state had not filed a formal response. We're planning to make your argument today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Very well. As to the affidavits in support, Mr. Zellman in particular, I saw that you had placed an affidavit concerning this matter, specifically for the court to consider this as it goes to both being advocate and witness in the same matter. How exactly is that to take place?
Your Honor, the rule requires an affidavit of 3 individuals, one being the defendant and 2 other individuals. It does not identify who they are, and also does not require that those individuals testify.
Again, you are the primary counsel for your client, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So as to your legal arguments and also your factual affidavit in support of, you believe the court can properly take notice of both?
Yes, Your Honor.
Does the state have any argument concerning those?
No, sir.
Very well. As to whether there's any issue with the court accepting that as evidence, I will conduct my own research, but we will move forward at this point. I do see Mr. Murphy is already in the Zoom. Mr. Murphy, good morning, sir. I think you're muted right now.
I only do this 10 times a day. Good morning, Your Honor. My apologies.
Good morning. Good to see you. The technology helps it be more convenient, but at the same time, well, at least you're not like the lawyer who was, I believe, on the Zoom saying I'm not a cat.
The morning is young, so I'll try to avoid that.
We're doing much better in that regard. All right. I believe previously in preparing for the hearing today, the time allotted was going to be 2 hours to the defense to make their presentation. The state would have a half hour to respond. I will go ahead and swear in Mr. Murphy, and the defense's time will begin at that point. Mr. Murphy, please raise your right hand to be sworn, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today as a part of this proceeding will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
You may lower your hand. Mr. Zellman, you may examine the witness when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a number of exhibits that we discussed the other day on a flash drive. May I approach with that?
You may. This is a newer version of this binder.
Some of the information has been updated. Yes, Your Honor.
Right. Is there any objection from the state as to the court considering this as admitted evidence for the defense for the hearing?
No, Your Honor.
The jump drive will be defense 1. You may continue.
So the way that I have the drive organized, Your Honor, there are 6 folders. Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, and Exhibit 3 are materials from TrueScope. Can I have permission to share my screen so that Mr. Murphy can?
You may.
So the Exhibit 1 is TrueScope's raw data that we had previously submitted. Exhibit 2 is the original report from TrueScope, and Exhibit 3 is the updated report that was finalized. We'll be going through those, and just by way of a brief opening, Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
It goes without saying that the 6th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, as well as Article 1, Sections 9, 16, and 22 of the Florida Constitution, guarantee and accuse a fair trial by an impartial jury. With that, Your Honor, I guess you've already sworn Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my full name is James Todd Murphy. I'm president of TrueScope in North America, Media Intelligence and Analysis Service.
And what is media intelligence and analysis?
Media intelligence is the overall term given to our industry that includes media monitoring, media analysis. It's kind of 2 components to the single industry. Media monitoring is the action of tracking and indexing and reporting media across or sources from media of all types. And then media analysis, sometimes called insights, is the analysis of that data, looking at both qualitative and quantitative information using a framework that is that can repeat valid results.
How does TrueScope gather that media?
We have 2 primary, or I would say two different methods. One is we use aggregators that pool content. So for like the broadcast data, we have a party that records all designated market areas, or those maybe simpler to think of those as cities. There's 210 city markets in the United States that are monitored. For example, New York City is number 1, and it's based on the size of the market area. So for TV and radio, we aggregate all that, and it comes to us in a feed that has metadata attached, so we know the date, time, station, and when the video is indexed to a timestamp. We do the same thing with the radio, podcasts. On the print side, we actually scan much of that, although we do receive feeds from partners of scanned and indexed data. Those generally are sent to us directly from the publishers as PDF images with the text layer behind it. So there's really no break in the chain coming from them for their printed media. We do the same thing with magazines. Social media, it's more of a feed from each social network. Facebook has a feed, Instagram has a feed, LinkedIn, etc. Online news, we use a system where a crawler crawls the web, pulls back anything that has changed, that then gets put into a feed. And these feeds all come into us via an API, which is basically just a conduit for communication. All that comes into our server or servers that are hosted on Amazon, where that data is then processed into topics and additional supplemental metadata. Additional data is added to that. Who's named in here? What industries are mentioned? And all of that then is indexed so we can run queries against that and report just specific topics. So if Judge Everett wanted to report each morning, for example, of anybody talking about him, he would get, at whatever specified time, a report of all media. Or if there's no media today, he would get a report saying there's no news about you. That's the media monitoring side. The media analysis side then takes all that data that we've captured for a specific topic and
really quick tangent. I don't know if you saw the other thing that I posted. That Jackie Fulfer, the female attorney, and Donna talk a lot, even in the short time since she's been at Wakulla. Even on Saturday and Sunday, they're talking. So she probably did loan her a little eyeliner. Her hair also looks very brushed. When she took the stand before, I think they wanted her to look disheveled. She looks more put together, perhaps for her media expert, but as put together as one can in jail. This ponytail back here still looks, as my mom would say, rat tailish, like rats have been sucking on it or a rat's nest, but the front looks nice.
We run some automated systems against that to generate media dashboards, charts, graphs. That's mostly for the quantitative side. Once the quantitative side has been developed, then we apply our methodology for the qualitative analysis. And stop me if I'm going too deep for this question.
No, this is perfect. Please continue.
Okay, so once we have the quantitative, we create the qualitative frame, using the methodology within our framework for the qualitative data. And that's currently based on the Barcelona principles, Barcelona 3.0 principles, as set out by the Global Measurement Association, trade association called AMEC, A-M-E-C. So we use the AMEC principles to make sure that we're using best practices in evaluating the media that we've monitored.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your background and training. Can you tell the court about your background in media intelligence and analysis, please?
Without sounding, I guess maybe too folksy, my family has been in the industry since before I was born. My father purchased a press clipping service, as they were called, in the late 50s. I began broadcast monitoring when I was 15. He wanted to add the TV and radio side, so I technically set that up for him. And graduated from college in 1991, began full-time, and then developed additional services like competitive media analysis, qualitative media analysis, and others.
You said you graduated from college. What is your degree in?
I have a degree in radio, television, and film, and a minor in psychology.
Beginning in 1991,
I'm guessing he didn't go to Harvard, because whenever someone does, they always are quick to tell you, I went to Harvard. He didn't mention his university, so suspicious.
can you advise the court exactly what it was that you developed through the company? And it wasn't called TrueScope back then, was it?
No, it was initially it was called Universal Press Clipping Bureau, founded in 1908. In 1998, I changed the company name to Universal Information Services. And then in January of 2023, I merged the company with a technology firm out of Australia by the name of TrueScope, taking on the name TrueScope in that month.
Can you tell the court a little bit about your other qualifications in the field of media intelligence and media analysis?
Sure. As you might imagine, a person who is born into it and grows up from a young age in it, I've held all the leadership roles in all of our trade associations, which includes IABM, which was the International Association of Broadcast Monitors, NDS, which was the News Data Services Cooperative, the NACPCS, National Press Clipping. It was an early press clipping conference. I can't remember the exact acronym right now. It was the North American Conference of Press Clipping Services. There we go. My apologies, Your Honor. Let's see, after that, became a member of AMEC to have the measurement side, and I've held North American leadership roles there, and currently I'm president of FEBAC, which is the Global Trade Association over all MMO, the entire media monitoring organization industry, which constitutes both media monitoring and media analysis companies.
Now, in addition to that, have you yourself also developed software that is now used in the industry?
Yeah, in the 90s, I had two primary developments. One, in 1995, developed the methodology for comparative media analysis, which was transparent, allowed you to see all the data behind the figures and the inferences, and allowed you to compare one entity against another. In the commercial realm, it might be a market, say Chicago, for example, that has a multitude of healthcare systems. It would allow one healthcare system to track how they're performing, both in terms of volume of media mentions, impact, reach, And then the qualitative side, primary message points where they either are leading or trailing their competitors. I also developed the first software and database and hardware solution that allow you to track multiple TV stations. The closed captioning that's embedded in broadcast programming. I had a program written where I could extract multiple channels, 4 channels simultaneously, all to a single database. And that was the first instance of indexing broadcast media, which has come in handy when people try to trademark and patent that process. Having that prior art has helped me.
Have you previously testified as an expert in media intelligence and analysis?
I have.
Approximately how many times?
I think this will be my 5th.
So the thing, I understand they're laying a foundation to qualify him as an expert. I'm glad the state did not put in their motion ahead of time, because I think the wrinkle that they're missing is he's aggregating all of this data, right? And I agree about the Gallup polls. Hopefully his is more intense because it's more digital data driven. But how does he identify that it was a saturation of media specifically in Tallahassee, right? Because that is the only argument to move it, is if it's so much media in Tallahassee that she can't get a fair trial. How is he narrowing down, like, Tallahassee got more than 2 counties over or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Like, because where are you proposing it be moved to, I guess? Where is there less saturation, less YouTube, less TikTok? Is that even a thing? That's the part that I don't get. And they haven't really, like, not extrapolated. They haven't expanded on that. I can't think of the word.
Formal testimony. We've done consulting for attorneys all along where they simply receive the data. But in terms of testimony similar to this would be my 5th time. Probably an equal number of our data plus an affidavit have been sufficient. If that's a fair answer.
Thank you. Your Honor, we were tendered a witness as an expert in media intelligence and analysis.
The state wished to voir as a witness.
No, Your Honor.
Court at this time will permit the witness to testify in the form of an opinion during this hearing as to the specific topics. I believe it was media analysis and what was the other?
Intelligence.
And media intelligence. You may continue.
Thank you. Now, in the field of media intelligence and media analysis, in addition to gathering this data, you also have to quantify that, and that requires math, correct?
Correct.
And the mathematical principles that you use are generally accepted in the field of media intelligence and media analysis, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
And in addition to the math concerning that issue, is it also generally accepted in your field to use similar mathematical principles to identify how many times somebody would have to see something in order to form a memory, and there's a standard formula for that we're going to go over, correct?
That is correct.
Now, on a factual level, how closely have you followed the murder of Dan Markell in state of Florida versus Donna Adelson?
I have not followed it at all. Personally, as a standard operating procedure, I tend to avoid news such as that on the principle that we may have a client that we serve in this capacity. Certainly once engaged by a client to evaluate a specific case, I will call it, I tune out completely and avoid all media related to it. Just on the outside chance, I might see something that subconsciously would influence my opinion. Now, anytime you frame something, for example, you're looking at me right now and you're forming an opinion about how I look, that's the principle I apply. If I were to see a television news story, it's through the lens of a reporter. Even if it's an unbiased story or what we might call a balanced story, it's still framed, and what's in the frame, or what they might call the mise en scène, things in the frame can also influence. So as a person in my capacity, I avoid specifics related to a case we have, if not before.
Now, how has TrueScope collected the data in this case? So
in this case, all of the data has been gathered through our standard operating procedure through our aggregate systems, transmitted via API calls into our servers for indexing, processing. The text is never modified. The data that we receive from the media outlet is never modified. It's simply categorized and basically labeled so it can be recalled and have additional information telling us who, what, where, when, why, what time, that type of information.
No, please.
And then that information for a client or a case such as this is analyzed and managed by my media analysis team under the direction of Cheryl Lewis.
And the way in which the data was gathered in this case followed the generally accepted methodology in your field.
Yes. So one of the things, we have 2 layers of check and balances above each of our departments. Jean Saucier, who oversees, she's my senior vice president, oversees that department. She checks to make sure that progress towards a timeline is being made, but also that each step in the process is followed. Within the media measurement team, they have 2 people, and we have a rule that 2 sets of eyes look at everything. So anytime a spreadsheet is created, the assistant media analysis person on this job would review it, trying to find any errors in the data. And then lastly, which I think you've been a part of, Mr. Zellman, is I review all the data with the team, and I ask for additional things that I want to see. It could be volume of mentions over time or something else. So I don't look at the data prior to the nearly final reports, and then I say, okay, is there something missing in this situation? And ask for them to produce that.
Now, in doing so, you talked about a spreadsheet earlier. TrueScope prepared a spreadsheet of the raw data in this case, correct?
Yes.
He didn't say what data, though. What are the sources specifically for this?
Is the spreadsheet that is on the screen the raw data that TrueScope collected?
That is our data.
Okay. Now, there are a number of tabs. What is the purpose of having these different tabs at the bottom?
The different tabs, generally speaking, or simply put, correlate to what queries resulted in the data found. So, for example, this first tab that you're currently showing would be a query for either Donna Adelson or Charlie Adelson. Potentially would include any variations on their name that would then be reviewed to make sure it's the correct Charlie or Donna Adelson. Each row on the spreadsheet then represents a.
Why are we including Charlie? Because they have the same last name? Because Charlie already had his trial. Like, now I feel like you're doubling up. You know what I mean? What do you guys think?
Single article or story or unit of reporting, whether it's a TV story or a website article, moving across the row, you're going to see all the metadata that is included with each story.
And can you tell the court how many articles, and this appears to be newspapers?
Yes.
Okay. How many different mentions were found? And what was the time period that TrueScope was searching?
So we looked at a couple of different slices. Some of it came back further than others to do some comparative analysis, I know. But overall, I believe we went as far back as 2014 to 2025 for some of the data. And then we also did a June 2023 to May 2024 sample analysis.
And so
I'm not sure that answered your question directly, though.
With the newspapers, this tab indicates there were 233 mentions of Donna or Charlie Adelson during that time period, correct?
That is that's exactly correct. 233 rows, but the first row would be headers.
I would ask them to extrapolate only Donna, or I guess extrapolate Charlie. Like, why are we looking at Charlie? And where on the planet hasn't this been seen? Like, is it going to go by region? Because unless they're having the trial on Mars, it doesn't really matter.
And then can you tell the court what this second tab is?
That would be another query, a new query. That's not looking specifically for either Donna or Charlie Adelson, but additional names associated with this case that you or
it's not just you, Kelly. They're doing it on purpose. They're trying to obfuscate the truth. But I think I saw Georgia in there, so I feel like she's gonna cut through the bullshit. Just let's wait for it.
the client would ask us to look at either for comparison purposes or whatever they need. We generally don't offer legal advice on what you need for your situation, but the advice we give is how we've done this in the past and our expertise in doing it in the past. And we would suggest, are there additional people involved in a subject that should also be queried to see how many stories mentioned them and in what relation to the overall subject you're most interested in.
So with respect to this tab, the searches were done for the alleged co-defendants or co-conspirators, McDaniel, Garcia, or Rivera, correct?
Correct. And although we just have last names listed, again, we would have ensured that we were using first names and variations that correlate directly to those individuals.
And for this tab, there were 308 mentions of those of the alleged co-conspirators, correct?
That is correct.
What is this next tab?
That's going to be a more of a, I call it a specific media type analysis. So it's a media type.
So that's why I call BS, because McBanoa had 2 trials. So her having more hits, that doesn't impact Donna. Like, we didn't hear a lot about Donna in the McBanoa case. I feel like this is all a show, a song and dance.
Within a specific name query. So in this case, we were looking at queries of Dan Markle, or a search term of Dan Markle in both broadcast and some web content.
Okay. Now, the dates in the first column, the formatting is a little off, but what does that represent?
That would be the date. That would be the date of broadcast. So in that first, or what is designated as row 2, that story aired on January 8th, 2014 at 5:34 p.m.
Was it January or was it August?
Oh, thank you. Because our technology is built in Australia, our dates are day, month, year, as opposed to
just correct.
What
was it? January or not?
We provide the service on a global scale, so even I have to remember that. My apologies.
Now, in this tab of information, does this include closed captioning from television newscasts or broadcasts?
It does. That's correct. So that's text inputted or live captioned by the broadcasting station or network.
And this also includes the link to that raw data, correct?
Correct.
And can you tell the court how many mentions there were, how many articles or broadcasts?
2,818.
And then what does this next tab represent?
So this is going to be what we call internally the roll-up of the quantitative data related to different views. So in this case, we're looking at cities or potential designated market areas. We include what county they reside in, and then we calculate, and the system tabulates the exact amount that each of those cities and or counties, the volume of media mentions. So that would be the number of stories or articles or web pages within that geographic area. Column B would indicate the total audience. People may be more familiar with the Nielsen ratings. That's where those audience figures come from. Sometimes you'll see them referred to as impressions. That often is a more generic term that can apply to other media types. But in terms of broadcast, that would be the Nielsen audience rating based on their methodology and their standard for establishing how many people have an opportunity to view that story in a specific geographic region.
And so would it be accurate to say that your team looked at the total amount of articles and broadcasts that were identified in the previous tabs and then sorted them based on market area?
That is correct.
And the total number of broadcasts or articles that were published and TrueScope was able to collect, what was the total for Leon County?
2,371.
And then where did you get the total number of adults in Leon County from?
That would be from the most recent census numbers from the government. So that's the obviously census.gov has that data. We use that data to pull the most accurate count as each census is updated.
And can you explain to the court what an opportunity or to be seen or impressions per person represents?
Sure. So whether it's a tabulated audience or unique visitors to a website, each media type has their own type of audience count calculation or impressions. Since the simple math takes the total number of stories and then divides that into the population of an area that we're looking at. So you take column C and column E and you can come up with, including column E, you can come up with a calculation.
Again, unless it has the geotag of where they are, and even that is fungible, right? Because I could be in California reading an article about it, but unless there is some geotag data attached to it, it doesn't mean squat for if the jury pool is okay in Tallahassee. Like, I just don't know why they're making a big deal out of all this.
Just on basic math, where on average, an individual residing in that geographic area would have X number of opportunities to see this specific story, whether it's hurricanes or a story about a hurricane or the subjects within this case.
Before you continue, Mr. Zellman, I do have a question on that point. Mr. Murphy, is the opportunity to be seen the same thing as definitive proof of engaging with that particular content?
It can't be, engagement can't be measured in what I call the passive mediums. That's going to be television, radio, because you might turn on a radio station in your car and listen to the news on your way to work, but I can't say that you necessarily engaged with every story. You may be a sports person and you just wait for them to get through the weather. So opportunities to be seen as I'll call it a more objective label to put on it when the media is passive. When it's an active medium like social media, we do have the ability to calculate engagements, like if you liked it, if you shared it, if you commented. So we do use the more objective opportunities to be seen to calculate the potential of an average adult or jury eligible individual within that geographic area to see a story.
Please continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, in addition to conducting this analysis for Leon County, did you look at other counties in Florida?
We did.
And we're going to go through that in the next exhibit in more detail.
No, they have not. That's why I'm surprised they're having this already.
Exhibit 2.
Ta-da! I love it. A name
Is
here.
exhibit 2 on your screen?
It is.
Okay. And can you tell the court what this exhibit represents?
This is going to be the output. It undoubtedly goes through several revisions until it passes all of our checks and balances, but this is a platform where we can visualize the data and annotate specific interpretations or inferences from the data to indicate to our client what a chart or graph or image might be showing in terms of their analysis on that page.
Let's go to the first slide. What does this first slide represent?
It's very small on my screen. One moment. So that would be similar to what we saw on the previous exhibit. This is the media coverage for nearly an 11-year period by county, from designated counties in Florida.
What counties, so Leon County, this is the 376 opportunities to be seen or potential impressions that we discussed previously. What other counties did you focus on? And we'll get to that in the next exhibit, but with respect to Miami-Dade County, what were the number of opportunities to be seen for residents, adult jury eligible residents in Miami-Dade County?
2.
Let's go to the next slide. What does this represent?
That's the volume of media coverage by media type. Excuse me. This is where we simply break down the overall media coverage that we're analyzing for the client to see which media types were most predominant. This often comes into consideration when I'm looking at active versus passive media types. It can also be used to make inferences based on journalistic credibility versus media reporting. Just to elaborate, believe it or not, despite what we often see in political rhetoric, there are journalistic standards that professional journalists try to adhere to when reporting as opposed to a person who might be creating media, a talk show, more of an opinion-based show, can have some greater latitude than a journalist might take with a story. But in this case, you can see TV news was the predominant, by far the predominant media type, followed by print media, with web and radio trailing behind.
What is the purpose of this next slide, slide 4?
That is what I call more of a control analysis, a simple control analysis to look at what would an average news story in the same area generate in terms of, say, impressions, or we look at several factors, total volume, how long it takes for that story to decay. Invariably, what it's going to show you is the attention, and the judge previously asked about engagement. There's a certain level of desensitization to the stories that are most common: car crashes, fires, things that we commonly see every day on the news. But we like to often look at what a average or common story statistically looks like compared to the story we're looking at for our client.
And so with this car crash story, how many opportunities do we see in our impressions? Trying to get the right slide. Did you calculate for the average story?
Well, I'm having a hard time reading that. It's going to be the number of stories divided by the population, but I can't quite read what, I don't want to confirm what you're all seeing versus what I'm seeing.
Let me see if I can zoom in.
No, it's like trying to pass the vision test at the Department of Public Safety motor vehicle.
Your Honor, I failed the vision test. I was just kidding. That's not true. For the record.
Can you, they're getting a little bit bigger, Mr. Zoltan.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes. Right. So this is going to demonstrate that this average story appeared in the media about the car crash. Let's see, six stories were reported on that topic, generating just over 935,000 opportunities to be seen. And I'm just reading at the bottom, the story appeared over a 3-day span in a population of nearly 160,000 residents based on census data. And then we apply, I believe in either in Florida or in your county, the jury eligible age is 18. And so we calculate only those over that age in our viewing population.
So with that calculation, the jury eligible residents had 6 opportunities to see one of these stories based on
That's correct.
And finally, with this exhibit, hold on. With this exhibit, what if the
I don't know if you guys heard what he just said. By that calculation, the jury population. But how are they defining the jury population, right? It has to be the people in Tallahassee. And so how are they quantifying the number of people in Tallahassee, which I think is just a little over 200,000, who would have seen these specific pieces of media? That's the part that I don't think they're driving home.
total number of juror eligible individuals according to census data in Miami-Dade County?
There's over 2 million in Miami-Dade.
Versus how many in Leon County?
Just under 160,000.
Before you continue, when you say census data, this is the 2020 census number that you're using as a part of
it. Would be the most recent census data.
Please continue.
2020.
I'm going to pull up exhibit 3. I'll try to make it bigger for you.
Right. The pool won't change, but what they see may change. How are they quantifying the number of people in the pool who saw this data? Where are they pulling that from? And how do we validate its accuracy? I mean, we already know it's not an exact population because they're using it from 5 years ago.
What does this exhibit represent?
So this is a timeline of media coverage, a quantitative count of stories over time. This is generally helpful in seeing the peaks and valleys. We can also easily interpret the decay of a story. So moving from left to right, in 2014, we see there's an additional starting point of the data, which then decays over the year to a low in 2015, and then spikes again during the year of 2016. Oftentimes, you can correlate those spikes to activity around the subject. In a case like this, it can be arrests, allegations, people being named, court hearings, but the spikes almost invariably will always indicate some activity around a specific topic. And then on the right side, you can see between the years of 2021 and 2025, a more rounded, but increasing volume of media coverage on this topic, which would indicate there are more things happening of interest to the media, and a slower decay where follow-up stories are occurring during that date range.
What does this next slide represent?
That's going to represent the impressions of the media. I'm sorry, the impressions the media are generating for that same time period. The scales are going to be different, so the peaks are still there, and so you can see the 2016 and the 2019 peaks, and then you also see that kind of 2021 things start moving up, and then that more rounded curve from the prior slide, you can see how it's represented by the impressions of the media covering that subject. How many people it's potentially reaching?
Okay, and according to the analysis that TrueScope has conducted, can you tell the court what 2025 is 2025 projected to be higher or lower than 2024?
Yes. Impressions from media coverage for 2025 are on track at this point to surpass 2024.
Now, what do we have here in slide 4?
So this would be another control comparison, impressions of volume of coverage to another recent change of venue hearing or case based on what data is currently publicly available. So it indicates media exposure within Idaho compared to Florida. And what it is specifically is a heat map of each state showing the density of media coverage in various counties.
And so this is what time frame was this analysis done during?
This was just a 1-year sample where we had overlapping data collected. Since we also did this work, this is overlapping data using the same methodology and framework from a case in Idaho, where we also had the same type of overlapping data from the Florida case.
What is represented in this slide?
That's going to be the same date range comparing 2 counties in Florida. The blue line would be volume of stories in Leon County versus volume of stories in Miami-Dade.
And how many, what was the volume of story? And again, it's that same 1-year time frame, June of 23 to May of 24. What's the volume of stories in Leon County?
283.
And what was the volume of stories in Miami-Dade County?
It was about exactly 60 last, 223.
What does this next slide represent?
It's going to be similar date range in county comparison, but showing the impressions, the total tally of audience. And it's showing that in blue, Leon County had more impressions within that geographic area versus the number of impressions in the Miami-Dade geographic area.
What does this next slide represent?
Again, this is going to be a media type donut graph of volume of coverage by media type, which is going to indicate, for me, passive and active media, but also to anyone who's viewing it, reveals which media.
Also, really quick, I want to do a Nancy Brophy caveat because I agree that the pool won't change, but actually it will because it's a college town. So had she had her trial in June, like when people were going away for the summer, it would have been a different pool than who's going to be there in August with the kids coming back to school. Slightly different, but you'll also have the students around where you wouldn't have had them in June because they would have got out of jury duty because they're going home. Right. So it will be slightly different, but how it gets to Tallahassee, from Tallahassee to Miami-Dade, she wants it where her people are. I can't remember. I just highlighted that. She wants it where people who are what she perceives like less country, less hillbilly to be looking at her. I think the 2 things that are against her, though, well, in Tallahassee, they're going to play the recorded message with her and Charlie where they're talking about the Black women on the jury. And I think they're also worried about how Judge Everett will perceive that. I don't think he cares either way. And then also the Nazi comment. But I don't think dressing children like Nazis is going to fare well wherever you have the trial.
That was more engaged or reported more frequently on this topic.
Let me go back. Now, over the lifespan of this investigation, July of 2014 to present, based on your analysis, do you have an opinion on how the span of time has impacted the media coverage in the case?
Yeah, I can certainly provide my opinion. In my experience, it shows a topic of interest to the media where the story has what, has, you may have heard the phrase, the story has legs. It has captured the interest of the media over time. Some stories, such as a car crash, at this point in time, it would be nearly impossible to find anyone in the county where a car crash occurred that can remember any details of that story. This is indicating repetition over time and volume of impressions over time are high. So what I would start thinking is I expect to see in the numbers a higher level of retention based on saturation of an average citizen in a geographic area. So this is, in my work, this is what I start looking at and building what my expectation should be coming in the downstream data. And if I don't see it, then I rerun it to see if we made a mistake anywhere, or if there's a contributing factor to why a story stopped. But this is to summarize, this is a very typical shape and volume of impressions for a story that captures the interest of the media over time at a high level too.
So I think that's a good segue into the math of memory that we discussed earlier. Can you explain to the court the concept of math of memory?
I hope everyone's had their coffee. So the math of memory is a basic probability theory that also uses a level of algebra, and it shows the ability to retain information, or inversely, how rapidly your memory of an incident or a story, in this case, decays over time. Ultimately, this formula is going to it shows, it's proven, and it's a globally accepted theory, that it has repeatable and valid results. The more a person is estimated to be exposed to a story, the longer they'll retain up to 80% of the details of the story.
The person we're referring to with this is someone of average intellect with no defects.
Right. Again, it's when we say jury eligible population, that doesn't account for anyone who might be exempted for a reason other than age.
Please continue.
So how does the math of memory, and I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy, were you done with the initial explanation of the concept of math of memory?
Yes.
Okay. And so how does, when you have number of impressions and opportunities to be seen, how does that factor into the ability of somebody to retain that information?
In my mind, it's fascinating how logarithmically your potential to retain information goes up once you surpass seeing the story just a couple times. So what we do is we apply the number so we take the total number of media mentioned or articles or stories, the coverage, divided into the jury eligible pool to derive the total number of opportunities for this story to be seen by a jury eligible person in that county. Then we can put that number into this formula and estimate statistically, I might say, I wouldn't perhaps say, but statistically, how long the average person of average intellect could retain up to 80% of detail on the story. I mean, in terms of years.
Okay, and based on training experience, when somebody has 376 opportunities to see an article or broadcast or podcast, how long do they retain that information?
If it's 336 exposures, I can't even estimate. I have to run the math again. I can tell you, for example, if a person's exposed once, that retention to interpret the story would be 3.3 minutes. And I've provided, I think you have that chart up as I provided it. You can see how it extends once you get up above 10. Statistically, it exceeds the lifetime of a human.
So breaking this down, with the opportunities to be seen that we have in this case, for an individual jury eligible of average intellect, they're going to be able to retain that information for their entire life.
Yes. And that's based on the resultant figure that in Leon County, the average jury eligible person was exposed 26 times.
Their premise also assumes that all press is negative, which we know is not true because she had that OBGYN that did positive press on Donna, right? So just because they've heard Donna Adelson's name doesn't mean they've equated that with guilty. I mean, to be fair, a lot of people have, but not all press is negative. So how are they pulling out the quote unquote positive data? It's not nuanced enough for me.
Just a moment, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Yes. He's trying to dazzle us with data, but it's not working. We're smarter than that. Good point, Kelly. Me too. Or sometimes I look at it, doesn't mean I agree with it. Look at all the Diddy coverage. There's so many like pro Diddy things. I'm not agreeing with any of it. I'm reading it.
Mr. Murphy, going back to the data that you were able to collect, you had mentioned earlier that TrueScope has the ability to collect and analyze podcast information and social media. Were you able to do that in this case?
My knowledge, no, we were not able to include podcasts specifically in this analysis.
And can you tell why that is?
There's two functional reasons. One, having access to the podcast and retaining that data, we need to have a client engaged. If we don't have a client engaged, we're generally conservative. When we engage a client, we're tracking and going forward in most cases. With some media types, we retain that content and we can do back searching. In the case of podcasts, it's a newer medium. We don't have the ability to do back searching into the same time frame with podcasts. So I think that was at least one reason why we excluded it from the data.
And what about social media? Were you able to include looking backwards at social media?
Similar situation. Social media requires that we register topics. That's an internal phrase where we, in a sense, put the topic into the social network of, let's say, Instagram, for example, so that it can return results related to that topic through the API that connects us. Since we didn't have engagement with your offer in 2011, none of that had been registered, so we statistically excluded that media type. One reason. That would be my primary reason.
So they excluded social media or just specifically Instagram? So they're talking about traditional media only? Newspaper?
So, Mr. Murphy, since TrueScope was not able, TrueScope in this case was retained in January 2025, correct?
Correct.
And so what you're saying about social media podcasts, because you weren't retained, you weren't able to go back in time to collect the data from social media and podcasts.
That is correct.
If you had been able to obtain that information, are you able to offer an opinion as to how that would have impacted your conclusions about total number of potential impressions, or as the court was asking earlier about active engagement?
Yeah, so there's a couple specific, I would say, factual things I can share. One, neither of those media types are able to be geographically pinned down. A podcast can occur anywhere, but be specific to another region. So it makes assigning it to a geographic region really impossible in most cases. So that's one reason. I apologize. Can you repeat the question? Because I got too deep in my first answer.
So I was asking how, if you could offer any conclusions as to how, if you've been able to obtain that information, how it would factor into your ultimate conclusions.
So the geographic issue is one. What it would have done is it would have simply increased the volume across the board. It would have been treated more like national media exposure. And let's just use a simple number of 100. Let's say if there were 100 podcasts, it has equal potential to be seen in any of these counties or heard, as the case may be. And social media is the same way. It would have an equal opportunity to be seen in any county, not in Florida, but globally. So statistically, it would simply increase the values across the board by the same number. You would apply an N factor to it, and it wouldn't change the charting of impact or opportunities to be seen. It would increase the opportunities to be seen in each county, but by equal amount. So the outcome would change, if that makes sense. And I can rephrase that if it was confusing.
I understood what you meant. I don't know if the judge would like a different explanation.
You don't know
Make
if
it
the
as simple as
judge.
possible.
The water would rise equally in every county, and so it would provide no an additional bump or decrease over another. It would just be a wash.
So in other words, if you had been able to factor in data from podcasts and social media, the numbers, whatever that number is, would have applied equally for Leon County and Miami-Dade County.
Right, it wouldn't change the outcome of the analysis. It would simply increase the numbers for all of them equally.
Cross-examination?
Yes, come
I
on.
think so, Judge.
I think you're-
Mr. Murphy, can you explain your fee schedule associated with your work on this case?
Woo!
I would have to check with my accountant. I see if I would have that detail. We generally, I can speak generally to our fee schedule. There's a monthly subscription cost for us to monitor the data. And then in addition to that, if a client takes the opportunity to have us analyze their data, there's an additional fee for media analysis. So in this case, there would be two components, the media monitoring and the media analysis. And then on top of that, if myself or one of our team members is asked to provide testimony like this, there's an additional fee for my time or Shell's time.
Okay, can you give us a ballpark for what the cost would be for work that you, like what you've done so far in this case?
Sure, a normal subscription to a monthly subscription of this type, and if I'm charging the client more, I hope that's not the case, but it generally runs around $1,500 a month for media monitoring. Analysis can often add another $1,000 or $1,500 a month to that cost. And then my fee, if I'm in person on site, it includes travel expenses, and then if it's just a one-day engagement, $10,000. If it's a virtual situation like this, my fee's $4,000.
Okay. Do you know how many potential jurors have actually viewed content related to this case?
No one can know that number for certain.
Aha.
So I think what we're looking at is possibility. Your question revolves around possibility versus probability. We're working with probability and statistics. When you want to say, I'm sorry, I answered your question. I won't go further until you ask me.
So the answer is no, we don't know how many potential jurors have actually viewed. We're basing it on averages and probabilities.
Correct.
Okay, and so is there a way that we could find out if an individual potential juror had viewed content related to this case?
Voir
I
dire.
believe that's part of what would be done in the jury selection.
And could we also ask the juror, how long did you view the item? How much of it did you retain? Questions like that could be asked at jury selection, is that right?
Yeah, any questions could be asked. Then we get into the psychology, the behavioral psychology side from my perspective. What's the probability? And in my case, I'll only be speaking to probability because space jump can fall on the courthouse and change everything. So I don't deal in possibilities, but the probability is what we presented in the numbers. I'll leave it at that.
Did he say a spaceship could land on there? I also want to point out, because this is a college town and there are 2 universities, they're using 2020 data. 4 classes have graduated from each university who were counted in the 2020 population who are no longer there. So spaceships might as well be landing as far as I'm concerned with his data.
Okay. Do you have any data or probabilities about what percentage of potential jurors have formed a fixed or definite opinion about the guilt or innocence of this defendant?
That's a complex question, which I would not have.
In your affidavit that you provided to the court in this case, 3 prior hearings were cited. I know you said 4 previous hearings you've testified in, I think. Is that right?
Including this one.
Okay. So 3 prior, and how many of those hearings was the change of venue granted?
In the 2 earliest ones, those, I believe, one was moved from Sarpy County to Douglas County. That was in the 90s, I believe. I don't believe, I think so, different circumstances impacted, I'll call it the boyfriend-girlfriend murder. I think, I believe the evidence was overwhelming and a deal was made before it went to trial or something. So I'd have to look back on that. In the most recent case, which is just about 10 months ago, that venue was changed.
So in the Katanachi murder cited in paragraph 14 of the defendant's motion, that case resulted in a plea, right?
That's my recollection. I don't have that information in front of me.
Right. So that venue motion was not ruled upon because the case resolved. Does that sound right?
That's my recollection.
Okay, and in Nebraska v. Christopher Edwards cited in paragraph 15 of the defendant's motion, that motion for venue change was actually denied. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so we're just dealing with the Idaho case. Is that the case that we're probably all familiar with, where 4 college students were slain back in 2022, I think?
Yeah, that's the most recent one. But there's a little bit of an apples to oranges in the one where the venue wasn't changed. I was only asked to present.
He's tap dancing. The offense should have got in front of this and put this out. This looks really bad. I mean, it's the truth, but it looks really bad. He's tap dancing on a hot tin roof right now.
On a report of media coverage, it wasn't a statistical analysis like this at this depth.
Okay, and in the Idaho case where the venue was changed, is that the same jurisdiction that's mentioned in your data compared to the data you prepared in our case?
I apologize, I don't quite understand the question.
When we see the map of Idaho in the exhibits that we just reviewed, is that referring to that case that occurred in Moscow, Idaho at the University of Idaho?
That's correct.
Okay, and in that case, the judge did change the venue to Boise, correct?
Correct, Ada County.
And would you agree that the population in that county of Idaho where the case occurred was significantly smaller than the population we have here in Tallahassee?
That is correct.
Okay, and in fact, in the motion that the court granted the venue change in that case, the court cited insufficient space in the courthouse, insufficient staff, and insufficient security.
One moment.
May I finish my question before there's an objection, Judge?
Please finish your question.
Go ahead.
In that case, isn't it true that the judge, in granting the motion for the venue change, cited insufficient space in the courthouse, insufficient staff, and insufficient security, aka deputies, to accommodate the trial of that case?
The infrastructure couldn't support it.
In his
Part of his
affidavit,
testimony has been concerning his work in Idaho, is it not?
Yes, Your Honor, but we did not get into whether or not the venue motion in that case had been granted or the reasons for that in his testimony or in his affidavit.
As to the subject matter, I will permit the question. If you are capable of answering the question, Mr. Murphy, please do so if you have knowledge.
I can only answer to the portion I have knowledge on, and I believe it was cited that the testimony of the media exposure was also a contributing factor, but I'm not an attorney.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. My question is, there were other factors in play. You may know that or you may not. Are you aware of that?
It's outside of my purview and role in this case.
That's not my question. My question is, do you know that that was in the order or not?
I will say no.
Okay. And
that makes him look bad. If you're touting that your testimony impacted the change of venue, you should have read the order, because wouldn't you want to know what part of your testimony impacted that? And did you only stop as it related to you? You didn't see they didn't have the infrastructure to support that, staff, building, etc. That looks bad. And then I don't know if you guys heard Zellman, when he objected, he was saying because they didn't go into that, which I'm questioning why didn't they? But now it seems like he didn't go into that because then it wouldn't be prime for cross. He's going to have to address it in his redirect because the judge let it in. I think it's key. If you're here talking about how your testimony and your data got something moved, we get to ask. We need to know how, what part of it, what's similar, what's dissimilar. Let's talk about all of it.
we have had related cases related to this case tried here in Tallahassee. Are you aware of that?
I would assume you've tried cases in Tallahassee.
What?
Co-defendants related to this case that we're here about have been tried here in Tallahassee. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay, thank you. In the spreadsheet, this was one, I think it was in Exhibit 1, Tab 1, where Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson appearances in the media are lumped together. Are you familiar with what I'm referencing?
Is it the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why were Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson lumped together for purposes of that presentation?
Thank you.
I would have to speak with the client and the media monitoring team to see why that query was built that way. That would be my answer.
Were the numbers ever run for Donna Adelson alone?
I'm sure they were.
and they weren't as favorable. That's why I didn't present it. That's the real answer. He's not going to say that. But if Donna Adelson data alone would have stood up and made the same impact, they would have provided that, because what logical person isn't going to ask that?
In the course of testing queries, we run them many different ways. Ultimately, we arrive at a query that best captures the media exposure specific to what the parameters are around the case our client has asked us to be engaged on.
Okay, so I think that kind of gets to my next question. Who made the decision to lump Charlie in with Donna in the data included on Defense Exhibit 1?
I would say, I don't know. It would be a collaborative discussion between the client and our analysis team and our search strategist.
Okay, but ultimately, if you have data for Donna alone and data for Charlie and Donna together, who's going to decide what shows up in Defense Exhibit 1? You or the client?
It's going to be a combination. We would probably offer a recommendation, since in these cases, either name is probably not in the news for another issue. And we often would search to see if, I'll say, John Smith, if he's involved in the case as an alleged conspirator or whatever, also has a car dealership that frequently advertises that mentions his name. We'll check to see if there's other contributing stories. If there's not, then we'll make a determination that if it would be statistically impossible to mention Donna Adelson without mentioning Charlie Adelson, we'll run the names together because the query is functionally one subject. Now, if either party in that query starts to exhibit a volume of content on their own and not in relation to the other party, we would separate that and at least counsel our client that we should run this separately.
Okay, so are you able to tell the court how many of those articles that represent Donna and Charlie together, in how many of those does Charlie's name only appear in without Donna? So I'm not really after, I asked the question incorrectly. Let me start over. I asked how many for Donna alone, but what I'm really interested in is how many does Donna's name appear in, period? That
would be done with you can do a simple search in the spreadsheet. And
okay, anybody who knows spreadsheets, you don't have to do a search. You can do a pivot and just pull Donna's name out. We can do that right now on the spot, right quick. Knock it off, sir.
Do a search not for a name, Charlie, or only for Donna, and see how many of those 2,000 plus stories only mention one name.
Is that something you could do for us right now, or that's something that takes time and analysis?
Right now, pivot.
It would take, I wouldn't want to do it
5
on TV.
seconds. Not on TV, sir.
And protocol and have 2 sets of eyes check it.
All right. So you don't have that data to provide to us right now as far as how many does Donna's name appear in?
The data's there. We would just have to, or someone on your side or another could sort it.
Okay.
Pivot.
When you're talking about opportunities to see a particular article or content, does that presume that all Leon residents actually have the same likelihood of seeing the content?
They all have an equal probability of being able to see the content.
Okay, but actual views could be consumed repeatedly by one viewer and not at all by another, correct?
Yes.
That's a possibility.
All right, so if you're saying I had 376 opportunities to see this content, it's possible that I, as an individual, could have actually not seen any of it.
Correct.
That is a possibility.
And it's 376 total opportunities over how many years?
I believe about 11.
Okay. And so I think in your math of memory, we can agree that the passage of time in general does not serve our memory well. Can we agree with that?
That is true.
Okay. So I would need to ask a particular juror, how long ago did you see the content and how much do you remember from the content to really know what that juror remembers, right?
Yes.
To know what an individual knows or can reveal, that would be correct.
How many opportunities does the average person, adult, have in an average day to have an impression from any content? And I guess I'm thinking of,
Students.
waking up, picking up my phone, scrolling this morning, turning on the news, riding to work, listening to a streaming service on the way to work. I've already been bombarded with a bunch of opportunities, haven't I? Just today.
I would need to know where you live.
Okay, but in general, let's just take the folks in this room that are sitting in here now. Like, we've already had a lot of opportunities to observe content. Would you agree?
Just
I
today.
don't think so. I don't know you, so I don't know what your propensity to consume news is.
But you deal in averages, and you're telling us what the average adult has the opportunity to consume based on that data.
Right. So I think if you look at the control story for a car crash, that would give you your answer.
If I look at
I think
what?
it was
You look at
opportunities to be
it.
seen or
You tell me.
something like that.
You're the expert.
Right, but we're bombarded with this stuff all day, every day, is my point.
I don't see relevance to the question for me.
Okay. All right, so can we agree that actual memories of an individual vary? I mean,
Let's
again,
see.
going back to what you were saying about I'm dealing with averages and probabilities, an individual might have differences based on their actual exposure to the content, based on their actual ability to retain information, based on their interest in the topic, based on what else is going on in their lives, their age, and lots of other factors. Would you agree with that?
I would.
You said the average person, the average Leon juror has been exposed, or at least had the opportunity to view material about this case 26 times. Is that right? Did I get
That is
right?
correct.
Okay. And do we know how many of those 26 contain the name Donna Adelson?
Ooh.
All 26 stories.
Couldn't it just have
contain
Charlie?
The search term. So these are 26 opportunities to see the specific story about, I believe in this case, Donna Adelson.
Okay, but it's got Charlie lumped in with it, doesn't it?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So it may
Yes.
not have Donna only. It may only have Charlie the way
Based
they've
on
done
those
it.
26 opportunities, you talked about the math of memory and how after a certain number of exposures, a person is likely to retain some of that information up to the rest of their life. Are you able to tell us what information is likely to be retained by a juror who's had these 26 exposures?
Yeah, it's the test on models can recall 80% of the details.
And so would it surprise you to learn that previously when we've asked jurors about this case, we get about a third that don't know anything, a third that know the headlines, and a third that have more detailed information. Does that comport with your work, or does that seem inconsistent with your work?
I'm unfamiliar with your procedure for selecting a jury.
Okay, but based on your analysis, does that sound about right, that that's what we would expect, or would you expect something different?
I can't, it's outside of my area of expertise. Jury selection, I don't do.
No, of the
But you're saying they
people.
would retain 80% of the information if they had been exposed 26 times. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying the probability of an average person in your county, I believe in your county.
Right.
that
So
would be the
based on
probability of an
that,
average person of jury selection age.
The probability of the average person of jury selection age who was in fact exposed 26 times retaining 80% of the information.
Have the opportunity to be exposed 26 times.
Okay. But they definitely have to actually be exposed to get any of the retention that we're talking about.
That is
right.
true.
He's tap dancing.
And we can't know that unless we ask them.
Knowing, yeah, I guess I can't. My work is in the probability of people before they enter your room. So all I can speak to is the probability of the people.
But you guys get that's what she's asking, right? Of these people that you're talking about, based on that population set that have been exposed and are retaining 80%, right? Of those people, there's a certain percentage that's going to remember based on what he said. There's a certain percentage that's not going to remember. And then there's a certain percentage that's going to have an opinion about what they saw. He should be able to answer this.
People you might encounter during a jury selection process. I can't answer a question about who you will encounter during a jury selection process.
Then why are you here?
Understood. No further questions.
I have a follow-up question, and from there, the parties can follow up as they need to. Mr. Murphy, I remember when you were testifying on direct that you were stating your numbers as it relates to the probabilities rely on the taking of the last census, correct?
Yes.
In any way, do these numbers account for seasonal fluctuations or shifts?
Are you, in
Like
terms of
college students?
immigrant labor or?
Well, let me be more specific. Here in Leon County, we have 3 colleges and universities.
I thought it was
Meaning,
2.
when you have a freshman class coming in each year, there are now 18-year-olds who will meet, presumably, juror eligibility. In that way, for that fluctuation of persons who may be eligible jurors by statute, does your data take that into account in any way?
I can't answer that without asking a question related to your fluctuating population. If you would like me to ask that question, I can, Your Honor.
You can ask. I'm not sure if I can give you much more, but go ahead.
So in the case of students, I have 2 children who've gone through college. Do they need to be registered voters? I don't know what the statute says.
They would have to have a driver's license that has a residency for this county. That would be at least the initial poll for coming into the juror pool.
So we would have to look at, let's say you have 20,000 students that fluctuate at the university level. How many of those have a Florida license, and a valid Florida license, and how many do not? You can probably get that statistic directly from the university of how many out-of-state students attend each year.
Very well. And would this impact what your numbers and analysis are?
Probably at a very marginal level. Once you remove the out-of-state students and those who don't drive, then you're going to be left. If we started with 20,000 and removed those who aren't registered with a valid driver's license, the number we get down to a small enough number that may impact the population of jury eligible students by maybe 10,000, like a small number that statistically wouldn't shift this maybe by a percentage, but nothing more.
I believe also you stated as well, you made a comparison of your data to Nielsen ratings.
Yes.
How closely would you say that mirrors? And the reason I ask this is because a Nielsen rating or maybe a radio rating, I think the science behind it, they tried to make it as detailed as possible because they're trying to use that information to monetize it, correct?
Correct.
But ultimately, even with a rating of that nature, when say it's reported there were 200 million people that watched the Super Bowl, that doesn't tell us, did you watch every snap? Did you turn it off at halftime? Did you turn it on in the 4th quarter because it was a good game? It can't really drill down. It's just ultimately, this is the big number that watched the game.
Right, on the gross number, that's correct. But then you're starting to get into the engagement level of the activity or the action within the media. So statistically, you can measure that people are more probable to watch a tight Super Bowl game that goes into overtime. The eyeballs on that overtime are going to be higher than maybe the middle of the 3rd quarter. So you can show some statistics around topics or activity within the content, and that's what you would see in the numbers presented as evidence of a car crash versus, say, a murder. Murders are always going to gain a higher probability of attention, are going to have a higher probability of attention than the topics we're desensitized to, like a fire, a car crash, a fender bender, a robbery, things that we see and hear every day and don't engage with because psychological behavior, we desensitize ourselves to those topics.
Very well. Any follow-ups by the state to the court's questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Zellman, you may redirect us to all topics, including the court's questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, thank you. Uh-oh. What just happened?
How closely would you say that mirrors? And the reason I ask this is because a Nielsen rating or maybe a radio rating, I think the science behind it, they tried to make it as detailed as possible because they're trying to use that information to monetize it.
Like a fire, a car crash, a fender bender, a robbery, things that we see and hear every day and don't engage with because psychological behavior, we desensitize ourselves to those topics.
Very well. Any follow-ups by the state to the court's questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Zellman, you may redirect us to all topics, including the court's questions.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yikes. Did we lose it? Let me see.
These
Here we go.
seen
Reflect that about a third in our individual voir dires on previous jury selections had no knowledge of this case. In and of itself, occurring. There were riots.
I'm going to go back. I think because we were speeding up, it jumped. Let me just see.
Overruled by implication. No higher court, no Florida Supreme Court case has said definitively that Singer is no longer good law.
Very well. State, you may provide your rebuttal argument.
Judge, what I learned from the defense expert is that there's been a lot of publicity in this case, which I think we all already knew, as is their right to report on a case that's been of high interest to this community, and that we have a high probability that we'll encounter some prospective jurors who know something about this case. Something I think we all already knew. What and how much and whether they formed a fixed or definite opinion are factors relevant only to those individuals and can only be learned at jury selection. Similarly, who has consumed inadmissible discussions of inadmissible evidence? We can only learn that by asking them who's listened to these particular podcasts, and I trust that the defense will do that. I also expect that it will be relatively few. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but again, the fairness that we're guaranteeing her of this trial is through that jury selection process, that those jurors will be asked those questions and that if appropriate, they will be stricken. To secure a change of venue, the defendant has the burden to show this court that there is a reasonable likelihood that prejudice against her in our community will prevent her from receiving a fair trial. How do we know if the facts or the media coverage of a case has prejudiced us such that the citizens of this community where this crime occurred are not capable of rendering a verdict based solely on the evidence that's presented in court, except in the most exceptional circumstances, which I can imagine, to answer your question about Smith versus Singer, I can imagine, maybe a George Floyd or a circumstance where the answer might be to avoid attempting to pick a jury because there's no point there. But this certainly isn't a case like that. The defendant in their own motion cite Lozano. Lozano is a third DCA opinion, not binding on this court and distinguishable from our case. But according to Lozano, a change of venue is appropriate where legitimate community safety concerns might.
So she's saying, hopefully you guys can hear me now. Sorry, I think I knocked the mic. Third DCA, which is the Third District Court of Appeals. I believe they're in the second district, so that's why she's saying not applicable to this case. So just as reference, and she's saying that that's what the defendant cited. So when the defendant cites it, that's their strongest citation, right? Why would they bring their B game? They would bring their A game. And she's saying even what they brought is flimsy.
Might influence a jury's verdict. Lozano was a racially charged incident in which a Miami police officer shot and killed a motorcyclist and his passenger, whereby they then crashed into two other citizens, injuring them. And it sparked protests in that community immediately upon the incident occurring. There were riots in the Miami area, which caused school closures. 130 block area of the town was cordoned off for crowd control, and the use of tear gas was deployed against the members of that crowd by law enforcement. So in the Lozano opinion, the court said that a fair trial could not be conducted in an atmosphere in which the entire community was so obviously, penetrated by the feels that resulted from this incident, which was basically like a lightning rod in the community. And the court
you literally couldn't get through the courtroom door, essentially, to start the case.
Right. I mean, I can imagine a situation where you can't pick a jury under a situation like that, where the jurors are potentially concerned about their own safety or the safety of the community if they render a particular verdict over the other choice. Dan Markel's death was felt deeply by many in this community. I certainly would never argue the contrary, but it's distinguishable from an incident like Lozano, which involved a community reaction driven by underlying social, economic, political factors, widespread fears within the community, and is prone to sparking something like a violent outbreak. Nobody's going to start a riot based on Donna Adelson's.
You got
verdict,
that right.
whichever way it goes. Next, defendant cites
Donna
Manning, a
might.
case in which there was a change of venue granted, but that cites McCaskill, where the test for venue was set forth, or the test for change in venue, I should say, but in which, in McCaskill, the motion for the change of venue was actually denied. And the court said a determination must be made as to whether the general state of mind of the inhabitants of the community is so infected by knowledge of the incident and the accompanying prejudice, bias, and preconceived opinions that the jurors could not possibly put these matters out of their mind and try the case solely on the evidence presented in the courtroom. What the defendant left off of that quotation in her motion was the sentence that preceded that quote that I just read, which states, knowledge of the incident because of its notoriety is not in and of itself grounds for a change of venue. All we've got right now is suspicion that several jurors are going to have knowledge of this incident. We have a case that's gotten a lot of media attention and has gained notoriety in our community. But to conclude that this case has rendered our entire citizenry incapable of giving Ms. Adelson a fair trial there's no evidence to support that. Manning was also a racially charged case involving the murder of two well-liked white deputies by a young black defendant in a small rural community. There were about 31,000 people in Columbia County in 1976 when the Manning case occurred. A voir dire inquiry in that case revealed that every member of the jury venire had significant knowledge about the crimes. That is not what I anticipate we'll have here. It's distinguishable from this case where we have successfully selected 3 prior juries on related cases under similar circumstances with similar media attention. And I would reference states 1 for that, which is the transcripts from trials 2 and 3.
Well, to that point, and I don't think the state is really disputing the mathematic analysis that has been provided by the expert, there has been a spike as the various trials have gone on, correct?
Sure, there's more content out there. I think some of the content is the same that's being hit over and over. And I think the problem with the analysis from the expert's perspective is that we're just going to divide all the content by all the people and spread it out evenly among all the people. And that's just not how the world works. Some people are going to pursue content. Some people aren't going to see it at all. Others are going to just look at headlines. Those people are still eligible to be jurors unless they formed a fixed or definite opinion about guilt or innocence based on those headlines. So to divide all content by every eligible juror and say, oh, you've all got 376 exposures to this, you're all ineligible. It's just fuzzy math.
So you're saying going from the general of what the math might be to the specific of if we take a random person off the street, we still need to ask, what do you know? What have you heard?
I think so.
Please continue.
I think that would be appropriate in this circumstance. I'm not saying it would be necessary or required in all circumstances, but certainly here, where the media content, yes, there's a spike because something's going on, stuff is happening, but it's the same, I think, going to turn out to be the same people consuming this stuff over and over and over again, and those people probably won't be eligible to be jurors. But as we learned from experience, there's going to be a lot of people that are still eligible, and I think we should at least try before we take this case away from the county in which it occurred and move it elsewhere. Certainly, I can't imagine a planet on which we move this case to Miami, which seems to be suggested by the defense. I mentioned when I was cross-examining the expert who had no knowledge of this, but I think that State's Exhibit 1 will reflect that about a third in our individual voir dires on previous jury selections had no knowledge of this case, which might be surprising to some of the people in this room who are consuming it regularly, but not everybody consumes this stuff. And about a third had very limited knowledge. Those people are still mostly eligible to become jurors. And then there's a third that have more detailed knowledge, and some of them didn't have fixed opinions and were still eligible to become jurors in the case. So while many jurors were disqualified in those proceedings based on their knowledge and their feelings about the case, there were plenty that weren't. We picked a jury in 2 days on the first 2 trials and then 3 on the third. On the third trial, we had a defense jury expert flown in from Manhattan to drill down specifically on individual voir dire regarding publicity. And that was a time-consuming process, and we still were able to successfully get an unbiased jury that was agreeable to both sides in 3 business days.
I'll review your exhibit, but do you recall of the jury that was actually selected, what was the breakdown of no knowledge, some knowledge, or stated they would set their knowledge aside?
My recollection is that it was roughly a third, a third, a third. But
And this is the most recent jury.
yes,
Go ahead.
I've just noticed that pattern both in voir dire, who we end up with, repeating itself throughout.
Okay, that is crazy that they didn't. She's talking about Josh Dubin, who you guys know Charlie and them paid $1 million to come down and help with the jury, which in my opinion isolated Rashbaum because Josh built this rapport with the jury, asking them questions. Georgia was amazing. They recorded that. There's video of that. You can't see the jurors, potential jurors, but you can see Josh asking questions. You can see Georgia. If you have time to kill or like want to listen to something at work, Georgia really connected with the jury during that phase. And then I don't know if Josh connected or not, but then he was gone and they never saw him again and they got Rashy for trial. But even with the $1 million juror selector, they still there were still people who had heard about the media and said they could set it aside. So waste of money. I hope Donna did not spend $1 million on this dude because she needs a refund if she did.
My life that has become this trial. It's happening over and over again. So can I say specifically that what we ended up with was that breakdown? No. But that has been my observation over time is like, gosh, there's a third of the community out here that still has never even heard of this thing. So I'm suspecting they're still out there. There has been a peak. Maybe we'll try and learn otherwise and it won't be possible. I don't think that's going to happen though, Judge. We were going to weed out the folks that are not eligible until we get down to a panel that's acceptable, and then we're going to proceed with other questioning. Since we've selected, 3 jurors previously, I don't think this recent spike in activity in media is going to somehow make it impossible to get the jury this 4th time. I did want to cite Copeland v. State. I have a copy for Your Honor in the defense if you'd like, but it's at 457 Southern 2nd, 10-12-1012, a Florida Supreme Court case from 1984, in which the court held that a widespread public knowledge about the case is not the focus of the inquiry on a motion for a venue change based on.
It also, oh shit.
January 7th, 2020. It's approximately 10.
Stimulus such that
it also doesn't help your headline situation when you're naked and screaming in your cell and people are making videos about that.
Today's media landscape is a smorgasbord of opinion, news, fake news, and everything in between. For better or worse, most of us navigate that information jungle to seek out or at least train the algorithm to feed us the stuff we want to see, the stuff we want to consume, rather than being fed, in 1961 in Indiana, what the editor of the local newspaper wanted us to learn. I get golden retriever videos. I've probably gotten 367 golden retriever videos, and I certainly couldn't recite 80% of them, for Your Honor, if a gun was to my head.
I love Georgia.
As evidenced by the prior jury selections and the related trials in this case, there just aren't that many jurors that are saturated with local media anymore. Just because the local media is churning out a lot of material doesn't mean that our jurors are consuming or retaining or forming opinions based on that material. There is a local community interest in seeing justice to be served in this case, and there's not a legal basis to move it. The jurors that have been exposed will be appropriately questioned and stricken based on their answers, but it is a bedrock principle of American criminal law to try the case in the jurisdiction where the crime occurred. The defendant has failed to show that Leon County is inherently prejudiced against her, and as such, the state asks that you deny the motion, proceed to jury selection here in Leon County.
Woohoo!
As the relief that you're asking for, is it possible also for the court to reserve ruling and still have jury selection?
Uh-oh. We're going to
You asking
reserve.
me?
I'm asking you.
I think so, Judge. I think you might have to readdress it if you attempt to pick a jury and cannot seat an unbiased jury in this case.
Mr. Zellman, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. First, Your Honor asked the state some questions about the jury selection in Mr. Charlie Adelson's case.
What was the breakdown of no knowledge, some knowledge, or could set knowledge aside for who was picked?
So I'm reviewing Mr. Charles Adelson's initial brief.
Okay,
appeal.
spit it out.
That brief indicates that there were 130 potential jurors that were interviewed on an individual basis. Of those, 96 had heard about the case. Of those 96, 53 believed that he was guilty.
But they didn't get seated on
Those
the jury.
persons were never actually selected to serve on the jury.
Correct. The brief does not give a breakdown of.
Who was actually selected?
Correct.
So you're wasting
Now,
our time.
I will say, Your Honor, that Your Honor will recall.
All right, are you done?
That there was one potential juror who claimed a lack of knowledge about the case. And in fact, that individual had posted negative.
I recall who. He was also shown the door.
Yes.
Therein, what is the prejudice?
What's the point? Or
Well,
the
that just
prejudice,
begs the
yes.
question, does that mean that anytime you have a case such as this, you have to hire a consultant such as the one that Charles Adelson hired so that you can get that information?
Can't you ask those questions, sir?
I don't think that is the way that we should look at things, Your Honor. Now, in response to the state's other arguments, the state has presented no evidence to contradict the studies that are cited in the defense memorandum.
Nor do they need to. The studies were flimsy,
Historically,
fuzzy.
Courts have attempted to mitigate the impact of pretrial publicity by conducting that individual voir dire. Unfortunately, the research concludes that that type of attempt to mitigate pretrial publicity is ineffective. Although I recognize that that is the approved, the courts historically have approved that method. However, the psychological research that is identified in the memorandum all stand for the proposition.
Look how Donna
that's just
is
not how
looking at
things
him.
work with the human brain. Just because somebody asks you, have you seen an article about Professor Markel's murder? Have you read any of the articles?
Objection assumes facts, not in evidence. You brought in a media expert, not a psychological expert of how the human brain works. I'm supposed to believe this guy who can't even pivot in real time knows about the human brain? Sir, stop embarrassing yourself. I don't care how hard your client stares at you. I don't care how much money she's paying you. You sound foolish.
Concerning Mrs. Adelson's alleged involvement. Have you formed an opinion? Unless you call somebody's attention to the specific article, it might not trigger that memory. That's what the research shows.
Before you go on that point, and I think in that way, this is where the constitutions have the interplay with each other. Obviously, Florida can offer more procedure or process than what the federal constitution requires.
Yes, sir.
As federal juries are selected, the judge essentially drives the process, questions of venire. Does not the Florida procedure give you more rights and more ability in terms of how that jury is selected to drill into those issues of bias?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm not going to comment further, but yes, Your Honor. The procedure in Florida does give us more protections than if we were trying this case in federal court.
So between a pre-screening and then also a full questioning, you still believe that bias cannot be ferreted out?
Given the way that the human brain works, I do believe that, Your Honor. I will say, Your Honor, and this is contained in a footnote in my memorandum, if the court, it's footnote 3, if the court decides to defer ruling or to deny the motion, the defense would request additional peremptory challenges as was approved by the court in Hoy.
Hoy.
Very well. I will review all of the exhibits that were admitted as a part of the hearing today that I was not able to do so prior to the hearing. I believe the jury selection
Exactly,
for
Colette.
Pamela and Charles Adelson are the state's exhibits, the charts and graphs that previously were updated or I did not have access to. A written ruling will be issued. We are in recess.
Your Honor, can
No,
we
we're in
reserve
recess. Sit
to
down.
file a supplemental affidavit to address the concern that Your Honor raised at the beginning of the hearing?
You may.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Goodbye. Goodbye, sir. OMG. Ooh, she's looking rough.
I mean, they jump drive, so I don't know if we can really put a sticky on. Okay. Get the state's jump drive. That's the defenses.
She needs to cut off that 2023 hair in the back.
Sure.
She's giving him copies of the cases she cited.
Thing and hold it, read it.
Dreams are already dead.
Hard copies, nice. Yes. He can make notes in the margin. That is right, sir. That was crazy. I don't like their expert. I think he was full of fluff when Georgia held his feet to the fire. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Okay. I can hear myself. So hopefully I haven't knocked anything loose and I'm not too loud. When Georgia held his feet to the fire, he should have been able to immediately pull out the Donna Adelson data. Like we asked about it straight away. Anybody was going to ask about it. And then you could do a comparison because I wanted to hear the story, right? Whenever you have data, it's telling a story. The way you selected it impacts the story. So you normally set up. So just as context, I work for a media company. I used to do, in my old role, I had a team that did analysis of they call it on-air reliability. So it's like normal broadcast. It's one of the top 3 like traditional media companies. And obviously we make money from ads, right? And so you have to be able to guarantee reliability. And our standard was 99.9999 reliability. We have to measure all the outages. So like if you're watching something and you, God forbid, you see barcodes on there, right? Or if the captions are wrong, those are all called outages. You have to measure those because you have to guarantee to your advertisers that you're meeting that level of reliability so that they know what they're getting for. And if you miss, something happens with an ad, you have to do what's called a make good, which means you have to run that ad again at no cost. So you're losing money. If they paid $1 million for the first ad, you're running another $1 million spot for $0, right? So when you put that together, you have to have the story of exactly what happened. So there should have been a story as to why they felt it was appropriate to include Charlie in the Donna Adelson data and also why they didn't separate it out. Like I said at the top, I was guessing maybe because they both have the same last name, but that doesn't necessarily bind them together in the mind of someone watching who is not a trial watcher, right? You hear Donna Adelson, you hear Charlie Adelson, you hear Rob Adelson. If you heard Rob Adelson, are you necessarily going to associate it with Rob is involved with the killing of Dan Markel? You would be wrong, right? We know you would be wrong. So just because you heard Charlie Adelson doesn't mean you would naturally infer that someone else with that last name also was involved in the murder. So he had zero story. And then he's doing the presentation and his excuse is, oh, my team and the client made that decision. And you didn't ask them the fuck why? And you're here telling us about it? You sound stupid, sir. You sound stupid. I mean, there's just no other way around that. And then when they ask you, because you know they're going to ask you, how do you not know they're going to ask you? You are not immediately able to press the button and say, boop, here's just the number with Donna. You were hoping they didn't ask you because it's not significant enough. Otherwise, you would have put it out there. You would have just put Donna and then say, not only is it damning with just Donna, we're also thinking they'll associate her with Charlie. So look at this number when we add Charlie. Right? It just is like, oh my God, I didn't like him. A lot of talking in circles. He didn't answer Georgia's question. Her question about this population was spot on. So if you're saying like out of 100 people, 60 of them will remember, and of those 60, there'll be 20% who will, 60 of them will be exposed to some form of media. 20% of them, which would be 20 people, would remember it. Another 20 won't remember it. And then another 20 will remember and have an opinion about it. Then you know it's like of your 100%, it's probably only 20 people Of your 100 people, there's probably only 20 people who will be removed. And you can do that through voir dire. He was like, well, I don't know how juries are selected. Nobody's asking you that. We're asking you, of the population that you cited, how many people will remember? He should have been able to answer that. I'm sorry. I'm just like, they're full of it. But I think Georgia got that point across. They made me mad. Sorry. I have some starred comments I want to go back through, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you for everyone for the super chats. Thank you to the mods, Yana, Bomber Green Eyes. I appreciate you guys so much. There were some at the top. Oh, we talked about that already with the Nazis. Okay, maybe we did cover all these. Let's go through what the current. It's just like and you have the 3 universities. You have the rotating population. They're getting a new population. They've had a turnover of 5 graduating classes. That's just the people leaving, and then also there's people coming in, right? So once someone graduates, someone else is coming in. And then you have 4 years. And just because they've seen something of it doesn't mean they've associated the defendants necessarily, because a lot of times I'll see, like, if a professor dies, oh my God, they died, but not necessarily who's all accused. I was telling another coworker of mine who is deeply into true crime and never heard of this case, and I was explaining it, and she was like, oh my God, this is something you couldn't even make up. It's convoluted. So I sent her the Over My Dead Body, the Tallahassee podcast, Wondery, because they have at least two Over My Dead Body. This is like, whatever, you guys know, Tallahassee. And she hadn't heard of it. And she's like a avid true crime fan. So if you're coming in from whoever, wherever, to the university and you're not into true crime, what are the odds that you've heard about that Dan Markel was murdered, right? Because it was in 2014, and B, that Donna Adelson was involved in it. I think she has no defense. I think she wants to go to Miami. You guys are right. Like, she wants those elite, who she perceives as her peers, to judge her. She knows the comments are coming in about the Nazis. She knows the comments are coming in about the Black ladies who she and Charlie were like, oh, they're postal workers or whatever the hell she said about them. Like, how do you know? Did they have to say? I mean, they may very well be postal workers. That doesn't mean they can't tell you're lying. Yeah. Poor kids having to live with the monster. Yeah. Oh my God, don't get me started on the kids. I had a cry fest this morning about children. I just, they have to know, right? Those kids have to know what's going on. They're old enough to have the internet and see, and like, where's grandma? Nobody's asking, where's grandma? Why is Uncle Charlie in North Dakota in prison for life? Nobody's asking. What's the explanation? The dumb Black people on the jury got it mixed up. It's a lot. Right. The paternal grandparents or aunt. Yeah. And that whole other like isolation, if that doesn't scream guilt, why haven't the Markels been able to see the boys supervised? Every visit has been supervised, and there's been stretches of years where they didn't see them at all. That is Donna's revenge, because Dan said he had filed a motion alleging parental alienation from her, and said he didn't want her to have any more unsupervised visits. That is direct retaliation, like that revenge that a narcissist needs, right? Everything is a zero-sum game. He will not beat the Adelsons. Someone's got to win. In Donna's mind, it's her, so other people have to lose, even though the parents had nothing to do with the divorce. They were not involved. I've seen interviews with Ruth Markel. It was like there was one extra person in that marriage, Donna, from the wedding day. That's just cruel. And they can never get those years back. It's almost, God forbid, like it's like a partial death, right? Like they didn't get to go to the bar mitzvah for either boy. And Ruth is not bitter. There were people who were posting pictures of Wendy at the bar mitzvah with her tatas out, and she asked content creators to take that down, like to be respectful of the grandchild, right? Like it's his day. Too bad his mom wanted to make herself a spectacle, because it was in Temple, so you shouldn't have Catholic churches like that too. I went to a friend's wedding in Switzerland, and like the dress that I had to wear, I mean, I knew ahead of time, but I had to wear a shawl. I couldn't even have my shoulders out, but she had like a deep V, and like her little dirty pillows were out. And people were posting that, making fun of it because they don't like her. And Ruth reached out to a lot of them because a lot of content creators are in touch with her. But it's just cruel. Like, why can't they have 5 minutes alone with their sons, their deceased sons, murdered sons, children? If that's not guilt, I don't know what is. They definitely associate them. But if you're just hearing about it in the news, like we definitely do, right? As true, I just don't know if you would think that solely based on the name. If you haven't heard of it and you're just seeing the name, like, do you associate Rob with this? Rob Adelson? I mean, maybe now because of the in-camera stuff, but before that, it wouldn't have been. I don't know. It's all annoying. Thanks, Grandma. It's like, but that expert was bad. And then to not know what the order said in Kohlberger, but you're here touting that your opinion influenced it. Well, which part, sir? How do you know? Did you just read the part like it was a school play? Like, look, Mom, here's where I showed up in the review. And then you just put it down. Like, what? And you're an expert. And then for Josh Zellman to go on about the psychology of it. When did you enter that into evidence? Like, we heard nothing. Like, from a professional. That dude was entered as a media expert, not a psychology expert of how the human brain works. Even we don't sell that to advertisers about how the human brain works. Like, they can get their own expert. We're telling you who's watching, how much money they have, where they live, what the value of the viewer is. Like, just is crazy what their interests are potentially, depending on how much information they reveal to like a Nielsen or something, political leanings, because obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but the company that I work for, they have multiple, not only the main media part, but then they have cable networks, which are being spun off in September, so we won't have them anymore. But it's pretty liberal leaning based on that, right? And so it's like, it's not Fox, let me say that, and then it'll be clear. Like, Fox has an obvious political lean, and then there are others, so all of that is kind of sold in. Yeah, just because someone is exposed to it doesn't mean that alone is what forms their opinion or how much they care. Do you know, like, how much free time, how much free bandwidth do they have to contemplate these things? Me, I have to tell you, some of it keeps me up at night. Just watched a trial, which I might cover the opening and the closing, where there was a young man who plowed in sober. Apparently it was out of Minneapolis, or maybe it was just Minnesota. He plowed into a car with 5 young ladies. He just rented an Escalade. The prosecution alleges he was trying to get away from the police, even though they didn't have lights activated, but he had a history of doing that. Plowed into them, killed them instantly, and had the nerve to have a trial. Like, who had heard of that? I don't even know what made me mention that, other than it was like, it rocked my world. Just 5 young ladies. It wasn't at an odd hour. It was in the evening. It was like, yes, we got to bring out the facts. Like, oh my God, we need information. I mean, if there had been a ditzy prosecutor, a ditzy judge, maybe that would have washed. I'm glad that he's reserving his ruling, though. I mean, I felt like he was, but it sounds like he might even reserve it until after voir dire, which is interesting. So they could still like have the voir dire, which in most cases that I went back and researched, it happens after there's an attempt to seat a jury. Because even I was saying, oh, they're going to wait until afterwards, right? Not that I'm an expert. I'm not a lawyer, but I am into data and facts. And I was surprised that they went ahead with it, but the fact that he's holding it is interesting. Also, I love the gamesmanship that Georgia did not submit anything written ahead of time. So she didn't give them anything to prepare for. It's like, let's see what you got, buddy, and then we'll go from there. Where if she had come in with like, what about this case? What about this case? They would have had a little time to research it. They should have done it anyway. They should have researched all angles anyway. You want to present it that way. But she didn't show her hand. She argued it all orally and then gave the judge like a written old school hand copy. Like, you can write notes in the margins, sir. I loved that. I'm so glad Georgia is back. Don't get me wrong. I love Sarah Dugan too. But Georgia is like no fucks. And I'm here for all of it. She was amazing. Okay, it's 12 o'clock. I'm gonna just like look at these, see if there's, I just want to make sure everybody is acknowledged and we what kinds of other evil acts I know they were so comfortable, right, Jesse? Like this is not their first rodeo. But this was at a much larger scale. But we know they're shady because even in the wiretaps, Charlie thinks it's like the IRS coming for them when the bump happens or something else or they got served. Charlie's had that whole scam. AA Legal Focus covered it with the workers' comp because his name was Mud after the first couple of trials went on, or even pre-trial. So people didn't want him in his office as the traveling periodontist. They were like, nope, can't come here. So he worked the system, or he tried. Yeah, Judy AA Legal Focus has the depositions and the filings, and he's totally trying to keep his income going, even though his name is Mud. They are I mean, I'd be interested to see their taxes. Has the IRS happened to them? Then there's things of like Harvey didn't want to pay credit card companies. He even one of the lawyers in something related to this case, he didn't want to pay them. So I was wondering, like, how did you even get Rashi? But then who was it? Kathy from Gossip Rumor and Innuendo told me he got paid up front. He was like, take the money and run. Which, I mean, if your client has that kind of payment history, hell yeah. Must be a shock to Donna's system. She's not keeping it shut, though. I have to tell you, these phone calls. Wait, I got a new batch of phone calls. Like, she may not be talking publicly, but quiet, she is not. The trial, that was horrendous. Prayers for the young woman. I've never seen an accident. Yes, you saw it. Oh my God. And then he had the nerve to like walk away. Even he was injured. He walked away and tried to blend in and then was like indignant. Like, why are you asking me these questions? What? That was awful. I don't know why he took that to trial. And I'm convinced his defense attorney is evil. I know he was just doing his job, but oh my God. And I don't know if it didn't get a lot of coverage because of the Reed and the Vallow, or because these were women of color that he killed. I just was like, holy crap, their whole lives snatched. Like in a second, their whole lives snatched from them. Imagine being their mom and getting that call. They were just going through a light, never saw it coming. Ooh, that one was rough. But yeah, it's like, Okay, it's after 12. Thank you guys for being here with me. I know we started late. I changed it because I didn't want to rush Sugar Bear. I was like, this will be here. We'll still get to make fun of Donna. We'll still get to hear this expert. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. And some of you guys will be on the rewatch crew, replay crew. I appreciate you. Leave a heart so I know that you came and all that fun stuff. All right, I'm going to play the outro. And I'm working on a Sarah Boone video. I have some more docs from Lowell about her visitors. Peter got accepted, spoiler alert, into visitation. So I'll have the details on that a little bit later today. Thank you guys. I appreciate you all. Toodles. Talk to you later.